Okay, so welcome back to my channel. This is going to be my recap of Marry My Husband, Season 1, Episode 14. So, Mr. Yu was home, and Ji-hwan is basically waiting on him hand and foot just to make sure that he's okay. So, of course, they're talking, and she apologized to him for not believing him and basically not giving him a chance. She really didn't give him a chance to explain the situation, and he basically said, well, no, I owe you an apology. Yura is not an easy opponent. And then he talked about, even after I saw her for her true colors, it still took me 3 years to break it off. And of course, Ji-hwan is like, well, unfortunately, you don't see things until the end. And so she talked about Miss Yang and how her fate has moved to Miss Yang, and she basically has to find a way to try to fix it. And so in the next scene, we see Miss Yang. She's in the car, and she's going through the GPS to kind of look at, somewhere what her husband has been up to. And she removed the memory card from the GPS. So there's really no timeline on how, when these things are happening. And so in the next scene, we see Suk-joon giving Mr. Yu an update on Ji-hwan's mom and Sumi's dad. Like they've located them, and they basically, they're basically in an agreement that they need to find them before Yura's people find them. And of course, Suk-joon was like, well, if you knew or, had a feeling that something was going on, why didn't you just tell me? And Mr. Yu was saying, well, because I didn't know if I could trust you. And then he apologized and he hugged him. And you can see Suk-joon kind of like, okay, all right, the touchy-feely emotion stuff. But it was kind of an awkward hug. So we're at the office, and of course, Mr. Kim and his nonsense. So while Miss Yang is out getting treatment, or on the days that she's out getting treatment, he's the acting manager. And so he's taking this time to kind of chastise Ji-hwan about her attendance, about how she's been taking too many days off. That fortunately, Miss Yang came in, and she was like, well, can I help with the situation? And so everybody was all happy. They walked up to her like, oh, you look great. How are you doing? We're so happy to see you. And, they're basically just sick of Mr. Kim. And so, of course, Min-hwan's never far behind. So he sees this whole interaction, and then he slips off to one of the conference rooms, and he calls Yura and basically said that Ji-hwan is at work today like nothing happened. And she basically told him that just be patient unless you like living like a bum. Like, she's going to deal with it. Just let it go. So we go to Yura, and her guys giving her an update. They've located Min-hwan and Ji-hwan's parents, and they are going to they're basically waiting for her to make a decision on what she's going to do. And so in the next scene, you flash to them, and they're like pigging out in this hotel. We're held up in this hotel room, kind of waiting until they can, I guess, get on their flight or whatever to China. So we're back at the office, and they're in their break room. So it's Ji-hyuk, Ji-hwan, and Miss Yang. And Miss Yang is basically saying that she knows that her husband is having an affair, and she already reported it to the police because at this point in time, it's illegal. And she was saying how when she's in the hospital getting treatment, that's when the woman comes over. Similar situation to Ji-hwan. And she told her husband that she had treatment that night because she basically wanted to walk in and catch them together with the police. So Ji-hwan is recalling her situation when she walked in. And so she told Miss Kim that she's going to go with her to make sure, that everything is okay. So later on that night, you see Miss Kim, Ji-hwan, and 2 police officers in the car. And they go into the apartment, and nothing is really happening. Maybe it already happened. Who knows? But the woman is there, but they're fully clothed. And they're acting like there was this, this whole innocent situation where, because Miss Yang is sick, she brought over some food so that the husband and I guess the daughter will have some food to eat. And I guess the police, there was really nothing they could do because there was nothing going on. They decided that they were going to leave. And so, of course, Ji-hwan is hesitant. She didn't really want to leave Miss Yang there by herself. But her husband, Miss Yang's husband, basically, because Ji-hyuk wasn't moving fast enough, basically said, you're not leaving? Basically asking, like, why are you still here? Bye. Get out. So Ji-hyuk see all the glass table, and she was like, before I go. So she took the golf club, and she smashed the glass table. And, of course, that noise brought the police back into the apartment. And so Miss Yang basically spoke up and told him that she heard him and that woman together in the car. The dash cam was out, so she doesn't have any video, but she does have the audio. And she also heard them talking about what they were going to do with the insurance when she died. Similar situation to Ji-hyuk and Min-hwan. And she slaps the piss out of him and just basically told him that he was just a horrible person. And he shoves her. She falls backwards, but Ji-hyuk had already smashed the table, so she fell backwards onto the ground. So now they find themselves in the police station, and Miss Yang is saying that, he is not going to go easily, so I'm most likely going to have to get a lawyer. And Ji-hyuk is telling her, please don't ever meet him alone. And she is basically saying, you basically think that Ji-hyuk's reaction is peculiar. She was like, she doesn't, really understand this concern that Ji-hyuk has for her. And Ji-hyuk is like, well, if I wasn't there tonight, you would have gotten really hurt. And so June actually spoke up and was like, well, I'll be by your side. And they kind of turned to look, and he's basically like, well, you said you needed a lawyer. I'm going to make sure that you, get what you need. So, because, he had wanted to take a golf club to him in the last episode. So, he's like, yeah, I'll make sure. I'll help you. So, Ji-hyuk and Mr. Yu are back at his apartment. And Ji-hyuk is basically saying how she needs to try to make sure that she transfers her fate to Sumi. Because if she doesn't, then Miss Yang is going to die. And so she's making this connection between the indifferent husband and the sick wife and the mistress, and she's trying to make a similar situation, of course, that she had with Min-hwan. She's basically like, I'm gonna have to seduce Min-hwan because he has to betray his wife, and at this point in time, Sumi is his wife. And so we flash to Sumi, and of course she's always plotting, and so she is basically trying to figure out how she's going to get Min-hwan to unalive Ji-hyuk. So the next day at the office, these red pumps. So those red pumps that Sumi had in the flashbacks when she went to the apartment and saw them at the door. Those same red pumps that she gave to her before they went to that cooking class, she's now wearing those red pumps. And so Miss Yu, they pretend to have a falling out because they know that Min-hwan is never too far behind. He's always in some corner or crevice somewhere eavesdropping. And so they pretend to have a falling out, and he gets kind of excited about it, right? So later that day, he's in the conference room. I think he's probably putting together some promotional material for the meal kit. And and Ji-hyuk walks in, and they're talking, and he was like, well, basically, you threw me over for a man because he had money. And she's saying that you were right, but, things have changed. And then she asked him if he wanted to go out later for drinks. So, of course, he jumped at the chance to do that. So he's talking to her about her $80 billion won estate, right? And she's telling him that, well, the chairman gave her that money. He basically paid her to leave Mr. Yu alone. So he eventually excuses himself to go to the bathroom, and he's kind of worked this out in his head. Like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But then, that's, even though I don't care how much money you have, that seems like a lot of money. And, he's just, going along with it. And so he comes back to the table, and she starts reminiscing about, this time where, she had this little apartment, and they would go to this all-you-can-eat buffet situation. And he was like, well, why are you remembering a time that was so pathetic? And she was like, well, no, I just think that everything back then was priceless. It was a time when money wasn't that important. And so, they're now talking. He makes some comment. I forget what comment he made, but she brought up that, she's making some, different choices in her life, and that, she almost got into an accident. This dump truck almost ran into her. And she asked him if he knew anything about it, and of course he said no. And she said that it was Sumi's dad. So we flash to Sumi, and she has been trying to call Min-hwan. She's trying to find out what's going on. This stuff is playing all in her head about, well, maybe they're going to reconnect, they're going to get back together, and it's just, she's freaking out. And so we flash back to the restaurant, and Ji-hwan is like, well, I know, that she hates me, but I didn't think that, she would ever want to hurt me. And then she says that I feel like I'm always being watched, and I'm scared, and basically she just doesn't know what to do. So they're now walking and talking, and this is his thoughts, right? He's saying, well, that kind of works out because she wouldn't be a good wife for a rich guy. But then, of course, he's like, well, if I seduce her and then we get married, then he would have access to the money. So he's all, in his mind, he's trying to work all this stuff out, right? So then she eventually got to the point and asked him to break up with Sumi and come back to her. And he kind of stood there stunned. And then she was like, basically, I should go. And so she goes to turn. And, of course, he pulls her in and hugs her. Like, he's kind of confused on what he's going to do. So eventually they part ways, and he ends up calling Yura and basically saying that Ji-hwan doesn't know anything, and that, she's not going to be a problem, like she's off the table, and nobody needs to get hurt. So Yura, basically, they get off the phone, and she tells her guy that she wants them to unalive her parents, Ji-hwan's mom and Sumi's dad. So he's now back at his apartment, and he's talking to Sumi, and he basically asks her for a divorce. And then he says to her, well, we have no kids, so there's really no reason for me to stay with you. So, he's just a nasty person. And she's coming to the realization, she was like, if you and Ji-hwan get back together, then I'm the one who loses in the end. So then we flash to the restaurant where Yunho works. So I don't know if I mentioned that in the previous episode, that the restaurant that he worked at sold overnight, and Yura was the buyer. And of course that wasn't for any particular other reason than to get at Ji-hwan and Mr. Yu. So she's now enlisting his help, and his payoff would be him getting the restaurant. She would give the restaurant to him. And so the next thing you see, at the office, and he is being, I guess they are looking at him to be one of the chefs for the meal kit. And so he asks to speak to Ji-hwan, and he basically informs her of what is going on with Yura, how she, asked him whatever, I guess told her whatever the plan was. And so, of course, Ji-hwan calls Mr. Yu, gives him the whole rundown. They get off the phone, and then you realize that he is talking to Yura's right-hand man. And he's basically saying that you can help us, or you can go down with Yura when the hammer eventually comes down. So, at the office, Min-hwan calls Ji-hwan, and he wants to know if they can meet up tonight. And she is like, basically laying it on how happy she is, and she's like, sure, and then a call comes in. It's Mr. Yu, and he basically tells her that he already has another woman. And so she was like, so I don't have to continue to play this game? Oh, okay. And then you flash to Yura, where she's opened this box with those red pumps. And so she clicks back over to Min-hwan, and she basically told him that she never wants to see him again, and that she would never do business with him, and they hung up. And then you flash to the scene where Yura and her guy it has already staged this unaliving. So they have made it seem like Ji-won's mom and Sumi's dad have unalived themselves. So we go to the next scene, and she calls Yura to introduce herself. So she feels like she has nothing else to lose. She doesn't have Min-hwan anymore. He's going back to Ji-won, or at least she thinks he is. And her father is nowhere to be found. And so she felt she's reaching out to Yura to, I guess, form some alliance. So in the next scene, Ji-won is working late. This weird stuff starts to happen to freak her out. And then, of course, Min-hwan appears out of the shadows. He's pissed that once again he feels like he's been played. And he is now strangling her. And Mr. Yu comes up and, of course, knocks him on out the way to the side. But at this point, he has been on her for a while. So she's now unconscious. And that is pretty much how this episode ends. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.